Hi, everyone. Welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. My name's Jim. Thanks for joining me. It's a rainy, overcast, soggy Wednesday afternoon, December 11th, 2024, here in Pennsylvania. We haven't had a lot of rain this season, so it feels odd to be driving around in the rain. I thought it was a perfect day to do a tag video. I was tagged by Book Chat with Pat. Pat has a great channel. I hope you all subscribe there. It's called the Shelf Respect tag, and this tag was created by Richard at richard.historylit. And I will tag some more people in this video. I'll do the full description with a list of questions that you can respond to. But anyone who wants to do this, you're welcome to do it. It's fun. Shelf Respect. I like the tag name. Basically, this is about how we shelve our books and organize our book collections. So I'm just going to run through these really quickly. It'll be fun to share and compare notes with people. We'll start with question number one. How do you organize your books on the shelves? Ooh, boy, well, there isn't a whole heck of a lot of organization, but I guess there's partially some method to the madness. In the particular house I live in now, we have 3 floors to the house plus a basement, and there's books on every floor and in different rooms. So the books are spread out all over the place, and there's multiple rooms on each floor. So how do I even go about this in a concise way? It's going to be hard. In the front room, what we call a living room, there's a bookcase in there, and that contains some of the art books, some of the oversized stuff. There's some books on mythology. There's stuff that's more like stuff my wife acquired, some fiction that she's read, a lot of oversized stuff, and it's blended a little bit with DVDs. But that's generally speaking what's on those shelves. As you move into what I call the middle room, we have 3 nice bookcases that are pretty tall. They've shown up in some of my videos already. And that, I think, is more where sort of my good-looking books, most of the good-looking books end up, especially on the 2 cases on the one wall. The leather-bound copies from Franklin Library, Easton Press, the vast majority of my Heritage Press hardcovers, which usually come in slipcases, those are all arranged on those shelves. So that mainly focuses on classic fiction and poetry. And then there's a few favorite authors spread out in there too, like almost all of our John Gardner novels. My wife is a big John Gardner fan and collected almost all his books, and I like him a lot too. I haven't read as many as she has, but they're all kind of collected together. On the one bookcase, on the other wall, there's my wife's Richard Russo collection. Most of that's hardcovers. Don DeLillo's on there. There's a little section on Eastern mythology and religion. There's kind of books that are published by people I know, like people I either attended their book reading and they signed my book, or some of the stuff that we self-published, or just friends of mine who have published books of poetry and fiction. That's in there. My collection of Educator Classic Library, children's classic literature, that's in there. So yeah, it's probably my favorite book room in the house is that one, and I just like to sit in my recliner and kind of stare at all the lovely books. There's a collection of Barnes and Noble classic hardcovers. With a lot of that is anthologies of Native American stories and Irish literature and Chinese literature and so forth, and Grimm's fairy tales and a lot. I went on a little spree a couple of years ago and picked up some of that stuff. So that's the one room. And then as you kind of move, I'll skip a couple other rooms in there. The basement, let me talk about that. That holds a ton of books. And that's where my Great Books of the Western World 1990 edition, the second edition, that's where that is. And a lot of related volumes to that. There's a ton of Penguin Classics down there. I'd say most of the Penguin Classics are in the basement. Oxford World Library Classics. There's philosophy down there, um, theater books, drama, screenplays. Science fiction is sort of collected down there as well. So there's a roughly like sort of loose thematic organization to these things. Poetry is down there too, but it's real messy because there's bleed over into other rooms. As you move on to the second floor, my wife, we call it her office, but we share it. But it's kind of a desk with a Mac Mini and a monitor, and then there's some old IKEA Ivar shelves in there. That holds a lot of old teaching texts, especially my wife, although we went on a huge purge a year or two ago. Um, and there's just like scattered stuff in there. There's like Beat Generation books. There's um, books of literary criticism and whatnot, but it's very mixed. A lot of that stuff is stuff that we might get rid of soon, so it's become almost an overflow room, but not quite. A lot of those books we'll still keep. Then there's our bedroom, and in the bedroom, my original conception with that was there's one Billy, I like the IKEA Billy bookcase. It's about 5 feet tall, and then a bookcase, a smaller or shorter bookcase that actually was inherited from my old bedroom growing up as a kid. There were two of them, but we only kept one. And then a smaller corner shelf. That was originally conceived for fiction, like especially modern fiction, contemporary fiction, and to some degree, it still holds that there's a lot of that. Most of that's paperback, some hardcover, um, but it's mixing with some classics too. And then you go to the third floor, and that's where my 1952 Great Books of the World, Western World is, and the gateway to the great books, and my great ideas today. That's really like the great books room, one of those rooms. And there's some other scattered stuff in there as well, some contemporary stuff. And then some books that were my daughter's, like, are in the bedroom that's up there. Stuff from her high school and college days. And there's some of those books are also in the room I'm sitting in right here, over here in the corner. But basically, it's spread out all over the place. There was one point when I was in my 30s and we were living in St. Louis, and we had this lovely apartment, and we had some Billy bookshelves and other shelving, and I decided to organize things chronologically, and then sort of going from all the way to the ancients all the way up to the present time, and it was mixed genres, but it was as best as I could. It was like chronological order. That was probably the most organized the books ever were, but since then, since we moved, it's been kind of like a mess, a glorified mess. But there is a little bit of method there. Okay, that was a long time to do question number one. Question number two: have you ever merged your collection with your significant other? Yes, when my wife Stacy and I first got together and we lived in media, we both brought books into that mix, but we didn't have nearly the amount of books we have now, and most of the books we have were acquired after we got together. So that wasn't really any kind of a big problem. Number three, do you write your name and or the price paid in your books? I definitely don't write the price I paid at all. I've never been really interested in that. And if there's a price tag on the book, I do my best to pull it off. Do I write my name? Sometimes I do. Most of the time I don't. Lately, some of the books that I want to give away to like a little free library, I might put my initials in a like sort of a secret spot that only I know where it is in the book. Just if I ever come across it later, it would be fun to like, oh, I used to have this copy. There's a remote chance of that happening, but I've done that just a few times. So I don't know if I'll keep doing it, but yeah, and books that are sort of special to me, or books that I taught from that if they ever got misplaced, I wanted them back. Like I would put my name in it, but usually not. Um, Number four, do you keep all of the books you've read or only the most cherished? Well, I certainly don't keep all the books I've read anymore. I was more of a hoarder in my younger years. I kept almost everything, but I'd say in the last 10, 15 years, I've gotten a lot better at unhauling books. And I really recommend that for people if you're wondering like which direction to go into. Keep the things that you cherish the most, the books that have sentimental value, nostalgia value, the books that you know you're going to come back to or want to come back to and do a reread of, books that really make you feel good, like you love the look of them. I love these illustrated books like Heritage Press and some of the leather bound volumes. Like they have a lot of shelf appeal and I cherish them. But even those, I don't keep all of them. Like sometimes I realize like it's time to move on. I'm not going to come back to this book, or I'm never going to read this book. It isn't enough for it to just be a good looking book. But I tend to keep the books I most cherish, but I probably still keep too many books. But you never know. And like I've had some regrets, stuff that I've gotten rid of that I wish I hadn't have gotten rid of. So, it's sort of a mess. Question five, does the style and quality of your bookshelves and or bookcases matter? Not really, not really. Like, a lot of these bookshelves come from IKEA and, they're not the best, but they're very functional. We did get some nice bookshelves or bookcases at one point from, I want to say it was Bassett Furniture down in Delaware, just over the state line. No sales tax in Delaware, by the way. And they look nice. Then there was another set of bookcases that ended up in our basement that we bought when we were out in St. Louis, and they're kind of nice too. But there's nothing, I don't really pay a whole heck of a lot of attention to that. As long as they're functional, as long as they hold up, that's what most matters to me. Some of our bookcases were made by my father-in-law, and those are cherished. He worked in a wood shop when he lived in a VA center in the last few decades of his life, and those have a lot of sentimental appeal. But other than that, then it doesn't really matter. I wish sometimes I could get custom built bookshelves or bookcases, but that's a pipe dream at this point. Maybe someday we'll become friendly with a carpenter and have the money to do that and the vision. Number six, do you have any gripes or complaints about bookcase construction? Not particularly. I mean, the IKEA bookcases, sometimes the back kind of pulls away and warps. They generally, other than that, hold up pretty well. Some really cheap bookcases that we've either trash picked or came across, like short ones, like sometimes like they warp, they sag, and that's a problem. But there's no real money invested in those, and you just move on to something better when you can. You try to upgrade. Number seven, do you ever stack books horizontally? I didn't used to, but now I do, and for a couple of reasons. One is I was watching some book design or people showing off their libraries. This was a few years ago. And I got interested in this sort of aesthetic of kind of like breaking up your shelves where you have things kind of sectioned off into like halves or thirds. So by stacking some of the books horizontally, you kind of break up that line and it adds a little interest to the shelves. And as we were really purging and downsizing a few years back, we made room so we were able to do more of that. And I kind of like the way that looks. The other reason is if the book spine, like for example, this one's a good example. If it's vertical, you have to read this up and down like that. But if you lay it horizontal, it's easier to read the spine. So for some of the nicer volumes, I kind of choose those types to lay horizontally. And, it's just kind of nice, more legible. But yeah, I do I do try not to stack too many horizontally. There's probably some risks in doing that. You can let me know in the comments and talk me out of it if it's a really bad idea. But in moderation, I do some stacking horizontally. Number 8, what are your 5 favorite jackets or covers? I can't answer that. It's impossible. I'd really have this. That's a whole subject for another video. I have to really think about that one long and hard. Number 9, what are your 5 most disliked jackets or covers and why? That also is a subject for another video, or maybe the same video. Yeah, I'd have to really think through that. I definitely have some likes and dislikes, but just in sort of general comments about covers and jackets, I tend to like Penguin Classics, the looks of those, but not the most recent ones. Like the design has changed over the years. Not that they're like horrible, but I really prefer like sort of like 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s Penguin Classics. I like NYRB Classics, New York Review of Book Classics. They have wonderful book designs, and I want to feature those someday. And I like leather-bound copies, but not. I wouldn't want every book in my library to be a leather-bound copy, and it has to, look good. And I really like Heritage Press books quite a bit, because those are like a lot of design and thought and artfulness went into those. Not every title is equally appealing, and there's a few duds in there, but generally I really like those when I find a clean copy used. But that's probably enough to say about that. Number 9 or number 10, is there such a thing as too many books? Of course, there's such a thing as too many books. You can hoard, and when you're totally swamped by the number of books and it starts to oppress you, like when you start thinking like, I'll never read all these books, or I don't know what to pick off the shelf now. Like it's like Barry Schwartz, the psychologist who wrote a book about this, called it the paradox of choice. Like where people who try to maximize their choices in life, and in this case, let's say it would be with like books and like quality books and all that. If you take that to excess, it actually can be more detrimental to your psychological health than if you're just satisfied with like a minimal number of choices. So I do think there's something to the whole Marie Kondo kind of like create space, clean up your room, live a little more minimally, the simple life aesthetic. There's something to that for sure. But I am not getting rid of all my books. Like I still have probably too many books, but I try to get rid of them and downsize in a moderate way. Like, so I don't want to have a whole lot of regrets. And there's so many books I really do cherish. I have great feelings about, and I might want to come back to them and reread them someday. But yeah, if things are just getting too junky in your house and the shelves are just stuffed to the gills and there's books all over the place, books on the floor would be a real tell, right? Like, just to not even be able to escape books. You probably, number 1, that's probably a fire hazard, and you should do something about that. But number 2, just take on the joy of like giving away books. Like it really is a good feeling when you can pass books on. And number 11, tag some others. So I'm going to make a list. I won't mention you here in the video, but I'll put a list of some of my book pals here, and I hope you do respond to this tag if you haven't already. And I hope you enjoy that little waltz through the shelf respect tag. Thanks, Pat, for tagging me. I enjoyed watching your video, and I've seen Steve Donahue's video and 1 or 2 others. So this is kind of a cool tag. I like it a lot. Anyway, enjoy, and hope you come back soon.